Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Computer Wednesday, we're gonna talk about Chrome OS. So let's dive right into it. Now, what's the idea? The idea is basically build a lightweight operating system. Why that is? Well, think of it this way. Microsoft OS, aka Windows, it's been running for so long that it has hundreds and thousands of lines of code which are acting as a legacy equipment. And basically, many times in program, you have to keep carrying them forward so everything works in a compatibility layer, so things don't fall apart. Now, benefit, it does work. Side effect, it becomes resource intensive. So the longer your operating system lives, the more bloated it becomes. So that's why people time and time again wants a clean slate. So that's what's the idea. Start fresh and build a lightweight operating system. And the aim was to make this basically operating system work well with low cost hardware. So they're not gonna be like, okay, you need latest Threadripper. It's like very low end ARM based system. Now where they are targeting is basically education sector. Now if you are familiar with very old computer industry history, so to say, you must be familiar with the fact that Microsoft was everywhere. That's why Bill Gates became the richest man there. But how the heck Apple became the richest company right now? So that happened because Apple played a long game. They knew they could not penetrate what we call corporate sector. So what they did, they flooded the schools. Basically they give them good deals. They try to cater to schools as much as they can. Now benefit of that is once children become accustomed to your equipment, they're gonna use your equipment till they grow up. So it's like a perfect marketing tool. So basically it's a long play game they did, and that's why Apple became such a big name today in USA. Now same thing happens, like Google is trying to do the same thing with this Chrome OS system. Target the education system. So once people get used to it, they will keep following using this. Now reality is because of the low power and all that jazz, people realized very early on that this puppy would need web to work at best, like flat out. It's like if you do not have internet, do not buy this, because you will be limited, like seriously you will be limited. So they're like, okay, you have to have web to, for it to work. Now another aspect is, this is one of the things that being a large company like Google, for a fact. For example, every Tom, Dick and Harry will claim like, I need the latest and greatest computer. What the heck do you do with it? Like how often your computer is running in a situation where it's like you utilizing 100% of resources. So let's say it has like 5 teraflops, let's computer horsepower, 5 teraflops. How much of that teraflops you are actually using? You may find that like Google, because they have the ability to track such a large amount of people, then will know for a fact, bro, most of the time you're barely at like 0.5. So they know for a fact. So even though everybody claims they need biggest and latest and greatest, most of the time they don't use it. Like of course, unless you are work professional, then it's a different thing, but most of the time they don't. So that's the whole reality. Like all you are doing is watching YouTube or doing web browsing. So in those sort of scenario, people are like, we don't really need much. Now, so what is it? So they finally succeeded in making a lightweight operating system. That was their core goal, and they started with Chrome. Now be mindful, in the very early eras, aka in 2011, June 2011 when they started, it was just a Chrome OS. It was like you open the system up, Chrome, that's it. There was nothing more to it. So they started with that. However, over time they started to build on it, simply because the core was very solid. Core was built on Gnu Linux based operating system. Now you may say, isn't Android already Linux based? Yes and no. Yes, but the core kernel is Linux based, but because they have, Google has put so much layers of security, tracking, hundreds of things that are in there, that makes it kind of bloated and not fair to call it like raw Linux. It's like not raw, but this is much closer to raw Linux, where it's like, no, this is, if you can understand Linux, you should be able to go deep into the operating system and do things that you should be able to do with a Linux system. Not 100%, but very close. So it's much closer to raw Linux than Android is. So that's how they started with this puppy, and it can support Android app because inherently kernel is the same. So, and if Google is working with you, they can make sure the Play Store algorithm works well with it. Now they slowly started to grow in capabilities. So when it came out, it was like very lame, but over time, like as in like 10 years kind of time, it started to become more and even more capable. And you have to understand, when this started to came out, as in like 2011, people were hoping for this kind of devices. Basically they're gonna have a mobile phone and they're gonna have a keyboard, and that will be the future. Now technically speaking, our mobile phones that we have right now, they're good enough for this sort of dream future. It can do that. It's just that basically there are multiple limitations. Now these limitations are not hardware limitation, these are more of a integration limitation. Is your app designed in such a way that if I do Chromecast on this 4K TV, will it utilize the display? most answer would be no, because the icons would be like freaking this huge. So reality is that it's like this is what people wanted to, like, hey, I want to carry one Android device and be done with it. Now Google is like, let me try to do it. So that's what Google is coming from. It's like most people can do surprisingly large amount of thing if they can just have a keyboard with their Android system. So what about the hardware? Now hardware, because they started from day one from ARM hardware as a core, like that's why that's the only way they can achieve the low prices. And because it's supposed to target it at school children and all the jazz, they're not supposed to be like idiotically expensive. Nobody is gonna buy that. So, and because of the success, slowly over time they started to also support x86. So nowadays you can buy equipment that has a, let's say, Intel and running Chrome board. So that's the whole point. And the main aim, this is not a system where Google is selling the operating system. This is a system where Google sits down with whichever manufacturer they want to build it. For example, HP, Acer, Lenovo, whichever company wants to physically build the device, they have to physically stay in contact with Google, and Google is going to do like a much more tight integration, almost like how Apple does with its hardware manufacturers. So it's far more tightly integrated, and that integration gives them some advantages. Now main aim of this integration was to make sure the price does not become stupid. So they knew for a fact that laptop prices are like coming down, so they cannot be like, okay, mine is like less capable Windows PC, that's not gonna work. So they targeted the price of $500. Now that's the upper end. Yes, there will be some Chromebooks that are more expensive than this, but reality is that's not the bulk load. Basically that's not what Google is selling so much. What they are targeting is like, that's the upper limit. That's like GG kind of Chromebook. But right now what they are trying to sell, like in case of India, that would translate to 35,000 rupees. But what Google will try to sell you is like this Lenovo patch. This is 2-in-1, and this puppy is around 26,000 rupees in India, which is good actually. Not the latest and greatest, not the most amazing thing, but this is good. This is like almost the same price as my mobile phone, and it does have bigger screen, does have bigger battery, does have a keyboard, does have a mouse. So now again, in terms of raw compute performance, this has weaker processor than my mobile phone, but you get the point. And because of the fact that it is more or less an Android system, 2-in-1 designs are surprisingly popular even for such a low price devices. You can buy laptops that are like 2-in-1, and most company will try to sell you a 2-in-1 simply because it's far more efficient that way. And because of the integration with Google, touch screens are thoroughly supported. It's not like Windows touchscreen kind of scenario, which really sucks. Like Windows touchscreen should have been mandated. It's like just give touchscreen, and then it would have been much easier for basically people to integrate touchscreen on laptops. And the fact that Microsoft is trying to integrate basically Android apps into its ecosystem would be even more easier if they had the input device for it. So that's why this is such a cheap device. But consequence of that, they do not have big hard drive. Now this is a very big thing. Even if all you are doing is media consumption, and if you got into a habit of, hey, my internet is not reliable, or I may not want to keep draining my internet every time I'm doing anything, because let's say you have a household and many people are working on internet, so you want to offload everything. Basically, hey, I'm gonna download overnight and then I'm gonna watch it throughout the day. In those sort of scenario, the lack of memory space on these puppies would be seriously hampering. For example, this puppy only has 128. Like, you have to utilize a micro SD card to expand it, so that is limited. And port wise, how many ports you can get, that's also limited. Even in some high-end devices like HPs and Acer, you're not gonna get multiple ports, not gonna get 4 USB or like 2 USB 3.0 and like HDMI output. You're not gonna get that. Port wise, idiotically limited. However, with all that limitation, it does come with great battery life. So if all you do is like spreadsheet work or basically email and all that, just this puppy can easily last you throughout the day without even breaking a sweat. Like, you won't even give a damn about it. Battery life is something that you charge at the end of the day. So that's the hardware side of things. So what are the actual uses of this sort of puppy? Well, do not even look at it if you are thinking about workstation. Now if you know what workstation means, you will know for a fact this is not for you, flat out. It is good enough for many tasks, however, and at this point in time, given the fact that so many of us deal with accounting, number crunching, basically human number crunching and all that jazz, it's like, it's good enough. It's not the latest and greatest, but it's good enough. Basically, if all you do is like work in HR and all you're doing is like going through someone's CV, portfolios and all that, this is more than good enough. So for many tasks like web browsing, office tasks, this is more than good enough. This is more closer to basically jack of all rather than master of none. So can you do video editing on it? Yes, in principle, because you have access to Play Store and you can download Android Play's video editing software. You can do these things. However, it's not master. But one thing that is very critical for basically parents and for enterprise market is that many years of security update. Basically, this puppy will make Apple look bad. Like they have even on cheap Lenovo equipment, they are targeting 8 years of security updates. Let that say 8 freaking years. And that's why I specify, whenever you are talking about OS, the older it becomes, the more bloated it becomes. And when Google started fresh for Chrome OS, they learned a lot of lessons. That's why the core architecture is built in such a way that updating it was something they figured out from day one. It's like, that's how we're gonna update it. So security updates are something that is done very well, and given the fact that Linux kernel is surprisingly robust, so fundamentally many people will like that. And if Google says like we can filter out your internet, they can do much better job than any other ISP. So if you're selling it to schools that are much more palatable, for example, they can say like porn would be completely blocked, and if Google says porn would be blocked, it will be blocked on your equipment. So that's why there is a lot of demand for this sort of equipment, especially in 2020. Now you have to understand one aspect of it. Even though it's cheap and even though it can do many things like a PC, it's not a PC. So what does that mean? That simply means if you spend the same amount of money, even you're buying like, let's say iPad that is around 35,000, upper limit of Chromebook, it will do more than what this puppy can do. So reality is, if you compare it to second-hand Mac, it will get destroyed. If you compare to PC, it will get destroyed. So reality is, Android apps are very efficient, there is no denying that. However, they are not powerful. What does that mean? That simply means they are limited by the user interface. For example, you can have an Android phone, but how much area is there? Like your finger cannot represent, like every element has to be big enough where you can click it. Otherwise, how the heck you're gonna use it? Now in this regard, Apple is doing a bit better because their tablet section was such a success that many apps are created in such a way that if you detect a large touch screen, it will be like, okay, I'm gonna expand the UI and scale it down. Now in Google case, you can mirror the system. Heck, I can utilize this TV itself. It has an inbuilt Chromecast, so I can project my mobile phone. But the outcome would be this will not scale. There won't be any UI scaling. So consequence, it won't be like, let's say I'm seeing let's say 6 layers of tracks on my video editing. It does not mean I can see 12 here, because this is a giant 4K display. It won't work that way. It will still show icons that are freaking this huge. So that's the biggest limitation. So even though on a core level, the apps are efficient, powerful, they are like limited by the fact that every primary app developer, they are thinking in terms of just and basically iPhone screen size. They're not thinking in terms of what if you connect it to your basically TV. Every smart TV now has Google Chrome built in, all of them. So if developers started to utilize this will create the next big thing. So that's the biggest limitation at this point in time, and I'm hopeful this will happen simply because more and more people want to utilize their Android phone as the primary computation device. More and more Windows is pushing for trying to run Android apps on the basically desktop. In those scenarios, you will need giant UI scaling abilities, and Google Chrome is also already doing that. So all these things combined, I'm hopeful that in future, like at least first party apps which are from large manufacturer like Photoshop, they will have the ability to actually utilize the screen real estate. So all these things being said, you have to understand this is a closed ecosystem. It's not like you bought the system and it's yours. The 8-year security updates comes with a bit of shackle, so to say. So that's up to you. You may like that. Heck, I would urge this sort of equipment for many old relatives, where it's like they want a computation device, but they want something like plug and forget. Apple is too expensive and very idiotically overpriced in India. In those sort of scenarios, I can just say, hey, this is far more feasible, where it's like, hey, 2-in-1, so you can just use it as a laptop when you are writing emails or chatting, or you can just fold it and utilize it as a display system. It's a really good. So it's good equipment, but not a PC. So this was my presentation on Chrome OS. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike. Press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.